All right, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to talk about Jermell Charlo and Terence Crawford and the fact that Jermell Charlo absolutely lit in to Terence Crawford in a recent interview that he gave before the Brian Castano fight. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back. So this is going to be a really fun video for me to make because I'm talking about one of my favorite fighters and one of my ex-favorite fighters, that being Jermell Iron Man Charlo and Terence Bud Crawford. As you know, or you should know, there's a really good fight coming up. I believe it's going to be in San Antonio between Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano. They should be fighting for the undisputed 154-pound title. Now, whenever you have these fights, you have the interviews that take place before the fight. And in this case, there was an interview that was given by both fighters, Jermell and Brian, to Brian Custer, who works for Showtime. So, the interview, for the most part, was just a run-of-the-mill, average fight. Average pre-fight interview. Brian Castano's asked what he's going to do. He has respect for Jermell Charlo, but he believes that he can win the fight. Jermell Charlo says, that he doesn't know whether or not he's going to be able to knock out Brian Castano or not, but he believes that he has the skills necessary to win the fight. So I'm listening to this video thinking, okay, this is really kind of ho-hum interview for Jermell Charlo, who usually comes up with something to say either in the pre-fight, either in the interview or during the pre-fight, or something wild comes out of Jermell Charlo's mouth. And I was not disappointed at all, because he hit on one of my favorite subjects, and that is talking about not only the pound for pound list, but also talking about Terence Crawford, who was one of my favorite fighters in boxing. And because for years I was very supportive of Terence Crawford. I was very supportive of him in the 140-pound division, specifically when he went for undisputed at 140 pounds. And when he did so, I knew that he wasn't necessarily fighting the best competition, but it's when you're in a weight class like he was in, where Danny Garcia had left the weight class, there wasn't a whole lot of people in that weight class for him to fight. He wound up fighting, the people that he could fight in order to win all 4 belts. He fought Victor Postal, he fought Felix Diaz, he fought Julius Ndungo. None of these guys are fighters that I think are world beaters, but still, they are who was put in front of him. But once Terence Crawford moved up to the 147-pound division, then it's like, come on, man. One fight I can understand, but this many fights, I wound up agreeing with exactly what Jermell Charlo was saying. So Jermell Charlo was asked about his pound for pound status. They did a video about this before, because he has been harping on the fact that he is not in the pound for pound top 10 and how ridiculous that is, seeing as he holds 3 belts. But in doing so, this time he couldn't help himself, and he took a shot at Terence Crawford and pretty much said, look, you don't have me on there. I've got 3 belts. But you have Terence Crawford way high in that list, and he hasn't fought anybody. I mean, he's like, who has he fought? Now, sometimes it is, in boxing, it is hard to separate name recognition from the accomplishments in the ring, right? So, for example, you have a guy like Manny Pacquiao, and people can say, oh, Manny Pacquiao has beaten all of these great world champions. But then you actually go back and you look at the fights and you look and say, okay, well, when did he fight these guys, and what stage were they in their career? And what you'll find is, when you look at and not just Manny Pacquiao, but like Canelo Alvarez now, they'll fight guys that have big names, but these guys will be late in their career, or they'll be in a weight class that they're not supposed to be in, the weight class, that is way up from where they originally started, where when the other guy is fighting in a weight class, is in the beginning of his career and is fighting in a weight class that really is kind of too low for him. like what happened at 154 pounds with Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez is always a 160 pounder, but he was skinnying down to 154 pounds and fighting guys that were like, you know, Shane Mosley's, and I think he even had a fight in there with Miguel Cotto, you know, just older fighters that aren't, you know, in their best state of their career. So you look at Terence Crawford's, but if you look at Terence Crawford's track record at 147 pounds, you can't even say that about it. I mean, you have guys like Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn is a journeyman at best. Jose Benavidez was literally one trip of the knee away from ending his career, and in fact, after he got done with the fight with Terence Crawford, he never had another fight again. Amir Khan had been knocked out by everybody in town. Egis Kalvanakis, that's the one could be redeeming person, but he fought a draw with Ray Robinson, somebody that Terence Crawford refuses to fight. And then Kell Brook, who was obviously a shot fighter at the time that he did that. And then at the same time, what Terence Crawford does is he's also avoiding some of the big names in that division, which is the big issue. Because like I said, at 140 pounds, you know, if you're beating the best people that are in that division, and that's just who is in that division, then you really can't say anything about it. You know, he gets his undisputed title. And hey, man, a lot of people think that in of itself is enough to make the pound for pound list, like what happened with Alexander Usyk. I don't think that anybody is going to confuse the cruiserweight division with the welterweight division, right? There wasn't really anybody in that division for Alexander Usyk to beat, but when he gets it, he's on the pound for pound list. So, but if you look at what Terence Crawford is doing, Terence Crawford is ducking the absolute best people, some of the best fighters in boxing, like Sean Porter, Keith Thurman. The fact that he won't fight Errol Spence is just absolutely ludicrous. Then you have Danny Garcia, who he refused to fight. So I love the fact that Jermell Charlo pointed that out and was like, look, man, how are you going to have me outside the top 10 pound for pound, but you have Terence Crawford way up at the top? And then he asked the question, who has he fought? And the question is, for the last 5 years, the answer to that is absolutely nobody for the last 5 years. Same thing that you can say about Canelo Alvarez. Who has Canelo Alvarez fought over the last 3 years, 4 years? Absolutely nobody. Because I do believe that fight was in 2017 between the Gennady Golovkin. One fight was in, I think, 2017. Two might have been in 2018. But that's been a long time since these guys fought anybody. So I really respect what Jermell Charlo had to say in this particular circumstance. If what he's done already by beating the likes of Erickson Lubin, who was an up-and-coming fighter, and you see that he's still doing very, very well in the sport. Austin Trout was a little bit over the hill. Tony Harrison, he lost one to Tony Harrison, but then came back and beat Tony Harrison by knockout. So we'll see if Jermell Charlo ever gets the credit that he deserves. But I'm telling you, right about now, I would take Terence Crawford clean off that list, especially since he's about to fight this guy named Jose Zepeda. And it's like, come on, man. At this point in time, you know, Top Rank just isn't giving us anything to judge how good Terence Crawford is because he's fighting tomato cans. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.